Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay? So, as I said, I'm Lisa Biton. I work at Alexander Muss, and our goal is to reach Zionist teens and to teach them both about Judaism and about Israel. And we are so proud to be a backbone of the World Zionist Village because education is really the key when we talk about future generations and what they will look like on the world stage. At Alexander Muss, we are a non denominational Zionistic program. And I know that can be kind of a dirty word today. What does it mean to be Zionistic? And our main goal is that students struggle with their Zionism, that they challenge themselves. I always say that my biggest fear is that a student will go away, they will graduate, they will come back and say, they never told us. There's actually a whole organization called They Never Told Me. And that's, students who say that they only got the pretty version of Israel, right? They only got the shiny Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, Kotel, and then they go about in the world, they go to universities, and they're told about Kfar Qasim, about the dark sides of Israeli history. And the second they hear one little bit of something that's dark or challenging, their whole world falls apart because they said, but we only heard the good stuff. We never heard that there was bad stuff. And so our goal at Alexander Muss is to teach students through these challenges. They wrestle with these materials, that we can't ignore the things that happened in Israeli history that are negative. And so when we teach any piece of Israeli history, we also teach those sections, right? So why do things like Kfar Qasim happen, right? If those of you who were last night with Yosef and his speech, there are Israeli Arabs who serve in the army, many don't. Why is that? Whose choice is that? What does that look like when it comes to the government? And these are all things that the students need to wrestle with in order to become better Zionists. Because if they feel they've only been sold a certain message, they will come out of it with a negative light. Now, the other thing we talk about a lot is activism. And I think activism is also a challenging word because on the one hand, we want our students to go out into the world and to be active Zionists and to be contributors to their community. On the other hand, everyone contributes in a different way. And so not everyone necessarily will be out on the front lines, be out speaking, but there are so many other ways to contribute. There are, building the relationships in the background, right? Helping these organizations to support themselves, creating events. Even the background of creating events is important. And so giving students the power to say that I might not be the activist. I might not be the one who's, facing and talking and, the face of the movement, but I'm going to be there in the back supporting my community in the ways that I know how to support my community. And one of the things we talk about, and it's funny actually, because if you were listening yesterday, Yosef, the speaker, gave a very similar thing, but I have a slightly different take on it that I learned when I was in college, and I think it's important. And it's called The Sinners, Saints, and Salvageables. So we always say when a student comes out and they are going back to high school or out into college and they are facing people who disagree with them, it is so easy to get caught up in the Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, quick messages, short blurbs, and all the quick things. But they are hard to argue with. And so we say in any given situation, there are sinners, saints, and salvageables. So let's take Israel, right? In 10% of the population, they are Zionists. They are pro-Israel. And basically whatever you say, they're going to agree with you, right? I would assume in this kind of position, most of the people around here are going to be in this situation. You say Israel's amazing. They say, yes, great. And you're on the same page. Another 10% are the sinners. Now, I know it's a negative term, but it's just easy for us to wrap our minds around. They're the protesters outside, right? If you go up to them and you say, Israel's amazing, they'll start throwing things at you, screaming at you. For the most part, it's no use talking to them, right? Because when you go out, they've come out, they've already set their minds, right? There's nothing to say. But in any given subject, Israel could be anything else, 80% of the population doesn't know and doesn't care. Now, they might show up to things because there's crowds, and crowds are sexy and exciting, and it's all over the news, and that's sexy and exciting, but they don't really care or know. And that's the population that you really want to be focused on. Those are the populations that you want to talk to. And whether it's in a large forum or whether it's as friends one-on-one or even, when you're in universities with your roommates, those are the people that you can have conversations with. And we tell the students that's where you focus. You don't need to get into the deep, dark arguments, the people who are, all the anti. They're not going to listen to you. And so it's important that when you're also speaking in public, and Nir Barkat did an amazing thing like this at San Francisco University back during the Intifada, where he was giving a speech about Israel, and a bunch of protesters came in. and they were screaming and yelling and, throwing things, the whole thing. And what did he do near Barkat? He was the mayor of Jerusalem at the time. He just got off the stage, brought all the people who were listening to him closer and closer and closer. And he kind of huddled with them and he kept speaking. And meanwhile, everyone's getting louder and louder and louder and louder around it. And he just kept calm, kept speaking, answered questions. And what the point is that the people watching are the ones important. It's not the people who are yelling, but all the people who watch, they saw Nir Barkat as being the calm, reasonable one, right? If he had gotten mad, if he had yelled back, then you would have had those highlights on TV, right? Here's the crazy Israeli who's, screaming back at the poor Palestinians kind of thing. But no, he stayed calm. And what came out of the news was, look at how calm and responsible and fact-based he was. And that's what we tell our students, that that's really what your focus is going to be. It's not about being the loudest in the room, because often the loudest in the room is not going to win the argument, right? It's about knowing your facts, being able to support them, and going forward, knowing in your convictions and talking to the people who don't yet have an opinion, which, again, as much as it might seem when we watch the news, everyone has an opinion. Truth be told, that's just the media, right? It's really not most of the population. So at Alexander Muss, we want to bring students in, and we want to teach them the history, because we believe that history is the core of our knowledge and that nothing exists in a bubble or a vacuum, right? That everything is connected to each other. And I say this a lot. I know people say that we're in unique times, and October 7th was a unique time, but we've been through similar challenges before during the Intifada, in the different wars. We constantly face these challenges, and we will learn how to regrow and rebuild. And that's what the students need to learn, that as much as we are living through a dark and difficult time in history, there are ways out of it. And by knowing what's happened in the past, we have a way to rebuild for the future. And so if we teach them the chronology of it, and this is where I think a lot of people, there's a new movement in studying history where we teach thematically and not chronologically. I understand it. I just believe that if you teach chronologically, you really see the strong train. And those of you who later might want to come see myself or my teacher Gabrielle, we're doing classes on the history of anti-Semitism and on colonialism. These terms, these things, none of them are new. They're just repackaged. And so if you know what to look for, it's kind of like looking for the AI in things, right? If you know what an image really is referring to, whether it's things like the blood libel, right? These same messages of, Jews eating babies, which, as crazy as it sounds now, anyone know when the last time it was accused of in the United States? Fun fact, no? 1929, which isn't that long ago. And even today, if you look at the images of anti-Semitism, of Bibi with blood dripping down his mouth, it's all the same images that we have seen from the ancient world and from the Middle Ages. So we believe that teaching students to see this chain of thought and to see this growth into the modern day, and as I said back at the beginning, to challenge themselves to wrestle with the material, because history is difficult, reality is difficult. And if students feel confident that they've already dealt with these challenges, that they've said, yes, things are difficult. Yes, there is racism in Israel. No, that does not mean it's apartheid. They will be able to be better Zionists and better speakers for Israel out in the real world. And that is what is most important to us, that the students feel confident in themselves and in their ability to present their future in a new way. One of the things that we always tell students, I know we teach Judaism and Zionism, but we're also asking them, what do you want from your life? What is your future goal? And at 16, I think a lot of people are like, why are you asking a 16-year-old? What do they know? But that is the exact time they should be thinking about it, right? It's the exact time, because when they choose a university, when they choose their path after high school, when they start dating, these are all things that are going to impact where they end up in the world. And they are huge moments. So if you say, a student says, what's important to me is being in a place with maybe a lot of Jews, or maybe it's being in a place with a strong pro-Israel unit, or maybe it's a place that gives me a strong international relations because I want to follow that goal. Having them think about these things, and I say this as someone who was once 18 in America, rather than all my friends are going to X, and therefore I'm going to go to this university or that university and, follow along with where I have been. We really want them to challenge. And I'll sum up by saying, at Alexander Muss, we take students out of their comfort zone. And part of that is physical. So we always start our programs with Lech Lecha, that these students have come from America. Most of the time they've come as individuals. Sometimes they come as day schools. But they've separated themselves from their families, from their parents, from their siblings, from their friends. And it gives them a moment to say, what do I really believe? Right? Now, again, I love my parents. We all love our families. But sometimes it's nice to take a step back and say, this is what I've heard my whole life. How do I feel about it? Right? What does that really mean? And again, whether it's religion, whether it's Israel, maybe it's even just your friend group. I have my own kids and my kids who had friends since they were like first graders. They were just friends because they were in the same area. And then suddenly they get to eighth grade, ninth grade, and they start thinking, are these really the people I want to be hanging out with? Is this really the type of person I want to be hanging out with? And Alexander Muss really gives students the opportunity to separate out and say, what do I want my life to be? How do I want to represent myself? And who do I want to surround myself with? And those are the ways that we create better Zionists and better educators and better community members for the future. So I thank you everyone for listening. And I'm happy, I don't know if there's time for questions or that's it.